we have a small group today, which is awesome. I'm glad that all of you could join. We were having a conversation about small grains and marketing small grains. And those of you who don't know who I am, I'm the South Dakota Organic Ag Transition Advisor. So thank you to Will. And Will, I haven't met you yet in person, and Steve, and we've got Carmen with us. And we had a couple other folks that were going to be on the panel. Morgan, did you see them join us yet?
I haven't seen them
Oh,
join quite
there's
yet.
Mike. He's here. Yes. Okay. So we were just waiting for Will and Charlie. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for this webinar on identifying organic specialty grains and crop markets. This webinar is supported by the United States Department of Agriculture Transition to Organic Partnership Program. The Transitional Organic Partnership Program in South Dakota is administered by the Organic Crop Improvement Association under a cooperative agreement to the South Dakota Specialty Producers Association and to support farmers in transitioning to organic farming. This webinar focuses on exploring the growing opportunities in organic specialty grains and crop markets with the Great Plains region. And during today's webinar, we will hear from experienced organic producers as well as an individual from OFARM and NForganics. We're learning more about what those organizations do. And so we have 1 hour and 5 minutes set aside for this webinar with time for questions at the end. So we have a Q&A feature that's built in. So if you're watching this recording, there's also video caption available. So if you're watching this recording and you do have a question, you could always email us as well at sdspaorganic@gmail.com. And we really appreciate your responses as we grow our program and complete the required reporting. So with that, I just have a very short PowerPoint presentation that I put together and kind of some just kind of kick us off on a conversation about specialty crops. So I'm going to share my screen. If I can do that quick. Hold on a second. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I was having some technical issues earlier, so hopefully I can get this to work. Let me know if you can see my screen, and then I will pull everyone off mute. You can go on mute. I think all of you have access to your mic to mute and unmute if you have a question. Hey, Charlie, thank you for joining us. Excited to have you with us.
You bet. Can you hear me?
So, yeah.
Great.
Okay. Just 1 second. Don't you love to have on my screens? I have multiple screens up and they're just kind of being funny with me. So just a second here. I'll get it figured out. I got 2 new screens that I'm working through. So here we go. I think I got it up on my screen. All right. I can go back to sharing. All of you see that on my screen, the image? Okay. All right. Awesome. So I just wanted to kick it off and just talk a little bit about what this webinar is about. So today we're going to be talking about growing opportunities in the organic specialty grain and crop markets within the Great Plains region. And this is geared towards transitioning and aspiring farmers. So what I'd like to do today is kind of talk about some insights and identify ways we can kind of tap into these niche markets. And so we'll have an opportunity to talk with some panel experts as well as some brokers and representatives from the Organic Farmers Agency with relationship marketing, I think it's the Organic Farmers Agency for Relationship Marketing, OFARM, and NForganics. And then we'll have panelists that will share their experiences and strategies for successful marketing organic specialty grains such as heirloom varieties, ancient grains, and other high demand crops. So in my experience as an organic farmer, and one of the questions that I get asked a lot is this idea about crop rotations and incorporating different types of grains into a 4 or 5 or a 7-year rotation. And Will, I've watched your webinars. I've heard some of you talking about this and the challenges that we have with marketing the whole crop rotation. So while there's a great market maybe for corn and beans in South Dakota, one of the challenges that we're seeing is not being able to find a place for the other grains that are in addition to just corn and beans. And I know, Charlie, you've done some kind of produced grains in this other space, and I have as well, but I found that it's a little bit more challenging trying to find a home for my oats and the wheat compared to my corn and my beans. And I know we're also dealing with a challenging market. We can't, ignore that it's been a bit challenging lately. So what I'm going to do next is just kind of talk a little bit about what the kind of looks like when we're talking about the Great Plains region. We're really talking about states like North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas, which is often known for traditional grain production. But we've also been seeing this shift in demand as demand started to grow for other grains like barley, spelt, buckwheat, rye, field peas, and lentils. And how can we incorporate those into our rotation? And in South Dakota, how can we turn those specialty crops into a market for us that generates revenue? So whether that's for food or feed. So organic specialty grains, when I'm talking about organic specialty grains, I'm including the heirloom and ancient varieties as well. That talks about that we kind of are hearing buyers are kind of interested in those unique nutritional profiles, flavors, the heirloom grains like the turkey red wheat, ancient grains like spelt, einkorn, and emmer, and some of those other varieties that aren't so common that used to be grown, I understand, in South Dakota, but maybe they're not being grown as much, but there's a growing interest in bringing those back. And also I wanted to talk a little bit about, although it's not the focus of today's conversation, about disease and pests and how do you choose the ideal choice of varieties for those organic systems. We're also seeing, due to increase in celiac disease and gluten intolerance, there's other grains that are being asked for that may be an alternative. And buckwheat is one of those for folks who are looking to lower their gluten levels. Buckwheat seems to be a big thing coming on the market. And I know that Carmen is on this call, and I had a chance to go out to Luke Peterson's field day in Minnesota and see hear his amazing story about how he's growing buckwheat for a particular buyer, and it's just amazing what he's doing in that space, just that relationship marketing one-on-one with those buyers. So farmers in South Dakota are beginning to adapt and beginning to think about specialty crops as part of their organic crop rotation as a way to help maintain soil fertility and reduce weed pressure, and also to help meet that market demand for those that is maybe as an economic diversification decision for farmers. So as this interest grows and farmers continue to look at these grains potentially for market premiums, how are we attracting those artisanal bakers and health food brands and restaurants that are looking for these distinctive ingredients, and how can we connect the buyers also with the growers in South Dakota? So we know that consumer demand is growing and it's rising among health conscious individuals and food enthusiasts across the Midwest and the Upper Plains. The trend is producers look at specialty grains as an option in their crop rotation. So we have this also unique location in South Dakota where we have access to like some key urban markets. We're not too far from Minneapolis, Denver, Kansas City, Omaha, which are really hot spots for organic and specialty food demands. We're not that far away. So, how can we as a region collectively work together to produce enough product to be able to supply those buyers who are looking for these grains domestically and not also having to source them from foreign sources. So we're talking about trying to get this product to processors and distributors in our region And what does expanding capacity look like with handling these type of organic grains? So I know that's a big mouthful. It's a lot of stuff, and I'm excited to hear from our panelists. But before I go any further, Morgan, do we have any questions or comments in the chat before we go to our panel discussion? We'll kick it off with the farmers first.
There are no questions at this time.
Okay. All right, awesome. So what I'd like to do is I'm just going to let each of you introduce yourselves, and I'm going to kick it off. Do we have Aaron on the call or just Charlie? I can't tell because I'm full screen, but I'm going to stop sharing for, I think it's just Charlie.
I know Aaron had texted me. He's loading a load of soybeans right now, so he's going to try to get
All
on
right, Mike.
as soon as he gets his load loaded. So
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, well, I tell you what, we'll just kick it off with Charlie then. Charlie, could you just maybe spend 2 minutes introducing yourself and a little bit about your farm and who you're certified by?
Yeah, this is Charlie Johnson, and I am from Madison, South Dakota. Most of you may know that it's about 45 miles north and west of Sioux Falls. And our family organic history goes back to 1976, when my late father started that with my late uncle, who's Aaron's dad. And today now I farm with 2 brothers and a son. We operate about 1,600 acres tillable. Our entire farm runs about 2,400 acres. We have a cow-calf herd. We use a 6-year rotation. We follow it pretty strictly. We divide our tillable acres into 6 different blocks of acres, you might say, and we rotate through a 6-year period. It actually starts with a small grain at the very top of the rotation. We use oats as a grain crop, and we sow alfalfa. Oats serves as a nurse crop for the seeding of alfalfa. And then years 2 and 3, we have alfalfa. Year 4, we rotate to row crops at that point, and we are using soybeans. After soybeans, we broadcast rye in the fall, which we have done already. And then the rye is a green manure in year number 5 for the growing of corn. And then after corn, we go back to one more season of soybeans. And then year 7, we're back at the top of the rotation with oats. So we're diversified. I can't say that we're expansively so. What I call smother crops, whether it be the perennial of alfalfa, the legume of alfalfa, or the annual and the small grain and cool season of the oats. And so we think it works real well for our operation. It provides us fertility, weed control, diversification. Right now, we're growing a variety of oats. Marketing standpoint, for quite a few years, we had basically it was a generic variety of oats. And so it was able to be marketed to a lot of several different seed companies that would actually clean the oats, bag it, and market it as a cover crop or as a cover crop mix. But since the variety that we grow now is protected by royalty rights, that's not an option that we could readily use either ourselves or to go into a seed buyer. So, but we like the oats. It spreads out our workload, which is nice. We can go in very early in the spring, get part of our crop acres sown and put into production. And it also provides straw for either bedding or actually livestock feed too. So, or in a lot of cases, we use the straw as a fertilizer for the ground. So I think I ate up my 2 minutes. So I'll move on. Okay. And I'm open
Yeah,
to,
no, that's fine, Charlie. There's also, you're doing on-farm research, is that right? With oat varieties with SDSU?
yes, we have. I think we're in year 6 or 7. And so every year they put in about a 2-acre plot right in the middle of our own organic oats field. And they experiment with different small grain varieties, mostly oats, but there's also other wheats and oat varieties that they experiment with. They're in 5-foot patterns, and again, it's all done and planted and harvested, and studies done and information put together by SDSU out of Brookings.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, I'm going to call on Carmen. If you could just tell us it's a little bit more about what you do in Minnesota. A lot of cool stuff.
I just sit around now. I'm retired. But about 5 years ago, a young neighboring farmer took over the operation of the farm. But the farm goes back. I first started farming organic in 1972, and then worked on through the years, and then in 2020 had the opportunity to engage this young family, a neighbor family, and so they're doing the work. Over the years, the rotation that I had, weeds, and it also a warm season, cool season crops. So that was always beneficial. The other reason is because I could use the small grains as a nurse crop for the alfalfa that was very critical in the rotation, as Charlie alluded to. One of our major issues in western Minnesota is the Canada thistle, and for over 40 years, we were struggling with how we could better manage that Canada thistle. And it was about 20 years into farming that I really introduced the alfalfa into the rotation, and from that point on, we've been able to really manage the Canada thistle. It does that as well as soil fertility and breaking up soil hard pans. But the challenge always was the small grains. When and where were the markets? But part of what really helped me a lot is, having somebody in the markets all the time, finding the market, so I could ask the marketer what small grain looks like it's good for next year, and that would dictate the small grain that I would plant that year. And because, as you alluded to early, finding the markets was always a challenge, and it was always the thing that was holding people back. Probably the best small grain that I was able to work with was wheat, but for any number of years I did grow seed barley for elderly seed, and then oats. I actually used oats 2 different ways. This was before I had livestock or cattle. I had a neighbor who wanted to green chop the oats and feed it, so it fulfilled the small grain piece in the rotation. But in 2018, and working with the University of Minnesota, we also introduced a new specialty grain called kernza, or perennial wheatgrass. And it has taken us until last February to really get that market going. And right now, we can't produce enough organic and ROC kernza to meet the demands. That's how good it is. So marketing the kernza should not be an issue. And what we also did is the kernza growers in Minnesota and the neighboring areas did develop and put together a co-op and have our marketer, Mad Markets, doing the marketing for the kernza. But it is definitely a specialty grain because we're talking about 200 and 300 pounds of food grade kernza per acre. But I just wanted to throw that piece in there as part of where we're at. And it's a perennial,
Okay, we'll be coming back to you. I have some questions. We'll get through introductions. We'll come back and ask a couple questions. Okay,
Sure.
Will.
Hello. So my name is Will Ortman. I live and farm between Marion and Freeman, South Dakota. I'm about an hour south of Charlie. And transitioned to organic beginning about 2007, 2008. So I consider myself still kind of new. But I guess I have been in 15 years. I'm certified with Oregon TILF. I'm actively, I like growing a lot of different things. It's one of the things I really enjoy about being organic is there just seems to be more of an opportunity to try different crops. And so and one of the things on your list that I have enjoyed dabbling with is edible beans. I grew black beans for Chipotle for a few years, and so I've grown buckwheat, I've grown rye, I've done a little bit with Kernza. One of the benefits that we don't talk about all the time with growing some of these more unusual crops from a soil perspective is that some of them are really good at bringing certain nutrients to the surface so that they're more available then for our typical row crops. And so there's some ecosystem services that happen that don't happen with the classic corn bean system. And so that's one of the things that I really like, and I think it's hard to put a value on that. But I think we should be trying to put a value on some of those things that these crops do that are outside of just selling the product. There's these secondary benefits that do have value. Yeah, I don't know. And I guess I should add too, in addition to grain, I also have a laying hen flock. I do some custom feed grinding for people, and I have some beef cattle and do some pastured meat. So I do quite a number of different things to try to have a diverse operation.
Yeah, I think with all of you, you have integrated livestock into your farming operation, correct? So the livestock is an important part of that. So you're not bringing in off-farm inputs, that you found a way to do it holistically with using recycling the nutrients on your farm to make it more successful. Okay. So I'm going to go back around to Charlie. Charlie, Carmen kind of talked about some of the challenges, but For you, what do you think is the number one challenge with accessing specialty markets for your oats or your small grains?
Well, again, ultimately, it's the buyer and the timing of the sale, or actually, more importantly, the timing of the delivery. As we know in the organic marketing world, there's times you can obtain a sale or a contract, but sometimes you're at the will of the buyer as to when and where the product's going to go. But normally, by having our agent, NForganics, it takes a lot of that pressure and worry out of the equation, so that we can go back to focusing about being farmers and producers and leaving that technical and delivery and marketing aspect to our bargaining agent, which is NForganics. So that's the beauty of it. And when we run into some roadblocks, ultimately we're able to find that buyer, and it's because again, our marketing agent is making those calls and making those inquiries, and then we're following up either with sending off test samples or other further information in making that all work. It may not be the greatest income producer for your farm, but rather than having a year or two out of your rotation where there's probably no income at all, it's good to have oats as what I call kind of a filler. It serves to at least provide that type of income that will cover, if you're charging yourself rent, whether you own the land or if you're paying cash rent, paying some of the expenses like taxes and overhead. And it's relatively a cheap crop to put in. What I like about it is you get in there early as you can in April. You get it sown, it comes up. It's nice to see a green cover on your soil come May already. So you've already got that, what I call a growing blanket on the ground. And more importantly, after walking so many rows of soybeans in my lifetime, it's kind of nice growing a crop where you don't have to get into that what I call the weed hassle of late summer when you try to rogue out weeds in your soybean fields. So,
Charlie, do you drill your oats?
yes, we do. Yep. And then we have an attachment on the drill that drops the alfalfa seed at the same time. And then normally after the oats is drilled that same day, we will drag harrow just to level out any soil clumps, and then we use a land roller right after that. Again, most likely in the same day, and that land roller, provides that compact seed to soil contact for better germination. And also, since we're haying that same field for the next 2 years, it pushes down all the rocks and other obstacles that are below the surface. So it saves on guards and sickles and rock issues down the road too.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna switch back over to Carmen, and kind of the same question, Carmen. What do you feel is like one of the best practices for specialty crop or accessing specialty crop markets? What is kind of one of your tips? You're on mute, Carmen. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, go.
Far and away, the best practice I ever used in raising specialty crops, small grains, is hiring a marketer. Everything else aside, because I didn't have the time, don't have the time to be calling all these buyers. I watched the time that Luke spends marketing those specialties, and it takes work, it takes time. So I really can't emphasize that enough. And it helps me focus more on the crop, focus on doing good work out there in the field. So that to me would be the best practice. The other thing I wanted to add, though, from what Charlie Johnson said, about 6 years ago, I decided I had to make a big investment. So I spent $70,000 on no-till drill. And that has been a lifesaver, because what we were able to do with that no-till drill is, first of all, we do 0 fall tillage. No corn or soybeans are tilled in the fall. So in the spring, when the ground is thawed out, Luke can be out there planting small grain from 10 o'clock at night until 10 o'clock the next morning, when the ground has about a half to an inch of frost on it. The no-till drill will penetrate through, and you'll get good seed soil contact. The no-tilling of the soybeans is not an issue. But most importantly, for small grains, especially oats, is that the sooner you get it planted in the spring, the better opportunity you have for a better crop, because you get ahead of the heat and the dryness of the summer, when that grain could be pollinating and maturing. And so most of the time, Luke is able to have that small grain planted 10 days to 2 weeks earlier than anybody else who has done fall tillage and waiting for that field to dry out and not be muddy or anything of that sort. I wanted to add that. And the other thing is, one of the big pluses with small grains is the non-cash benefits that it does allow. Charlie was alluding to that, but also here in western Minnesota, above I-90, planting cover crops after corn and soybeans really does not work, unless you want to strictly stick with something like rye. And so what it also allows, with a small grain, is you harvest a small grain, do your light tillage, put on your hog manures or whatever it is, and then put your cover crop on. And that cover crop has a tremendous opportunity to grow up until freezing. In fact, the turnip and radish are growing at almost to the 1st of December. Also, if you have livestock, then, and that's what we're doing right now, we are grazing those turnips and radish and the volunteer grain that has come back. So it's that non-cash benefit also that the small grains can provide. And I just can't emphasize that. And finally, using small grains spreads out the workload. You're working all spring to get the small grains in. You got the time then to put the corn and the soybeans in. Come mid to late summer, you can take and harvest the small grains, so that everything doesn't just pile up in 1 month in the spring and 1 month in the fall. So those would be all of the big benefits that I can see with using a small grain.
Awesome. Thanks, Carmen. A lot of good stuff there. Will, we're going to switch over to you. Kind of the same, and we, challenges, one challenge, one success in identifying and accessing specialty markets for these small grains.
Well, yeah, finding the market is a real challenge. And I kind of echo here what Carmen said. I don't really know how I would go about it without a marketer that works on my behalf, finding these opportunities. These opportunities in these smaller markets don't fall in your lap, and so either you have a connection by chance to, it's all in who you know, and I don't know I don't know enough people to do that myself. And so Mike here at NForganics finds those opportunities for me. In some cases, it's really important probably to have a contract before you plant. Especially the more exotic, you go, the more important that is. And Mike could speak to that. But yeah, I would say it's really important to have somebody who is in the marketplace and knows these buyers. Sometimes it's the same kind of operation that would be buying, corn and soybeans, but oftentimes it isn't. And so yeah, uncovering these markets and finding them. They're out there. It's just a matter of locating them, and I think most farmers underestimate how difficult it can be to find these markets. So
Will, I have a question as you were speaking. It was just coming to mind. One of the challenges that I ran into was volume. I understand, you're not getting a lot per acre on these grains. How are you selling it? Is it by the truckload? I mean, are you able to get truckloads, or how does that work?
yeah, that's a good point, because one of the scary things is some of these product crops don't produce. You have to plant a whole bunch of it to have a semi-load. I'll just give you one example here. Recently for me, I grew buckwheat last year for the first time, and I had probably half of a semi-load. Okay, so what do you do there? So together with Mike, my marketer, we decided that I would send that to a cleaner, and so we shipped that part load to a cleaner, and the cleaner then clean them up to food grade status, USDA status, and then put them in totes. And so now they can be marketed in 2,000 pound increments, and so that's kind of how most recently I've dealt with that issue. But if you're dealing with less than semi-loads, how do you, and there's shipping cost element here as well. Hauling around half a semi-load of something is not very cost effective, and so there's fortunately we have a really good, reputable organic grain cleaner here in South Dakota at Millbank, and I think that's an asset that those of us in this corner of the world should keep in mind, because that's yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I actually had for Carmen, is storage for the small grains. Are you shipping it out right on the truck as you're harvesting it, or are you storing it for amount of time? And if so, are you storing it on the farm?
By and far, what I learned early on, if you're going to do any kind of organic marketing, and much more so with specialties, you need to have on-farm storage. It just because you never know what kind of a harvest season you're going to have, and you never know when the buyer is going to want it or not want it, and it gives you an opportunity in case you don't have a buyer, but there's still the opportunity to store it. But then more importantly as well is to have good storage. Never put up a steel bin without a full floor aeration, because that is the best way to keep the grain in condition. And so bottom line, on-farm storage, it's your best tool to give you a better shot at the markets. And that way you, and just one other thing, generally, markets are at their weakest during their harvest. And so if you have the opportunity to store it, your carrying costs are probably going to be taken care of as the market increases again.
Charlie, how are you marketing your oats? By the truckload right out of the field, or are you also storing it some?
Yeah, everything goes from field to bin storage out of the field, and then by semi to the end user when those delivery calls are made.
How many acres of oats do you typically do every year, Charlie?
Anywhere from 200 to 300 acres.
Okay.
So we're dealing, with 15 to 20 to 25,000 bushels a year.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to switch gears a little bit because we're kind of leading into the next portion of this, which is the discussion with how the brokering and the grain marketing side of this works. Because oftentimes when once we're approached with the growing challenges, oftentimes before we even get into that mode of thinking, oftentimes farmers will say, well, where's the market for this? Like, should I forward contract? What does that look like? And then so they kind of like start at the end and work backwards. And so we have two folks with us, Steve and Mike. And I'll start with you, Mike, maybe give a short introduction about what you do with NFO and where you're located and kind of what your organization does. About 2 minutes.
Okay. Thanks for having me. My name is Mike Schulist. I'm manage the organic grain department of National Farmers called NForganics. National Farmers NFO, our home office is in Ames, Iowa. We've got a dairy division, a livestock division, and a grain division. And our grain division is both organic and conventional. And our dairy side of National Farmers is heavily on the organic side. They do a lot of work with Organic Valley in marketing the milk and providing the field work for Organic Valley dairy producers. I work out of my home office, central Wisconsin, right outside of Stevens Point. I'm a lifelong farmer. I dairy farmed for 28 years. Everyone's got a story to tell. My dad was 65 when I was 18. I took over the farm in 86 and milk cows 28 years. Transitioned into organics back in 2004, and I got on the organic truck with our milk in 2007. We just things happen. In 2014, we decided to quit did the dairy part of things, and I rent my ground out to my cousin now who grows organic potatoes. He grows organic potatoes, and this year on the farm he had something different. He had organic green beans. So it was really kind of cool. I get involved in organizations, the food webs down in southeastern Iowa. They're trying to come up with crops other than corn and beans. What can we grow? And a big part is, the highest and best use of your land and the infrastructure, the businesses. I know, like even in our small farm here on the 30 acres of green beans, there was an independent contractor that had 3 bean harvesters and a semi, and they showed up to harvest those green beans this year. So, things like that, the infrastructure, in South Dakota and with these diverse rotations, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of, cool things that can happen along.
Oh, great. Thank you, Mike. We'll come back to you in a moment. Steve?
Hello, everyone. Steve Boyda from Northeast Kansas. I'm a organic farmer and also a member producer of Central Plains Organic Farmers. And we're based out of Kansas. We have licenses in Nebraska, Colorado, and we do business in Colorado. And then recently we added Montana, and we're looking at expanding in the Midwest in some areas. We have 2 full-time marketers that market the grain for our producers, and that's a big distinction between someone just buying grain and selling grain and somebody that actually works for the producer, like Mike does with his producers. And it gives, as a producer myself, it gives me the confidence that if the marketer says we can get this sold, or we really can't find a market for this, I better listen to them. Otherwise, I may not have a successful farming season like I thought I was. So that's the main thing. For CPOF, we're 100% organic. We focus on organic, and to be a member or board member, you have to be certified organic producer.
Okay. So you're a cooperative model, Steve, is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
we are.
And Mike, with NFO, do you have to be a member, or how would someone connect with you?
Yeah, you'd have to become a member. Our membership's $125 a year, and then we do marketing agreements with producers once I have the crops sold. We are certified organic as a handler. Actually, I just had my inspection this morning, so
Okay, there you
go
go.
through yeah, it's an interesting business. It's there's a lot of opportunity out there, but in the flip side too, it's not as easy as people think it is to shift gears and to become organic as well. So there's
Yeah.
challenges.
Okay. Well, Mike, we'll just stay with you for a moment and we're going to talk a little bit about building relationships between the farmers and the buyers. Can you just walk us through a couple minutes on how do you guys connect the dots? Because that's what I often hear from people is like, I have no market for my grains. Do you buy specialty grains or you just do corn and beans, and what opportunities are there?
We do we're pretty diverse in our sales. I know in the springtime here we just hired a fellow that works quite a bit with the specialty grains, and we are moving totes of Durham. We just sold some Durham out of Montana here. Working on some Icorn and some other specialties. I will agree with Carmen, the best small grain that's marketable, the best market you could have is with the wheat. If you hit a quality of wheat that's a food grade, a high protein, and that's in good demand. It's a movable. We're pretty busy right now on the wheat side of things. On the oats, again, too, the quality, the heavy test weights, that usually moves. One that's really been a challenge for us, and it's because quite a bit comes out of Canada too, is the rye market. If you can grow organic rye just for a green manure crop on your farm and hold some seed back for yourself, you're ahead of the game. But boy, trying to sell rye right now is a challenge. The demands on the other rotations, corn and soybeans, there's demand out there. There's corn demand out there, but it's at a lousy price to say the least. So going into it, we're getting some interest too now in the field peas side of things too. That's been one market that we've been able to sell right off the field this year as well. So
Okay.
just to be diverse and even having the livestock and the alfalfa in the rotation, that helps as well
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move over to you, Steve. What do you feel are some ways in which your organization kind of connects the buyers to the sellers and that relationship type marketing, and how would someone connect with your organization?
We have several long-term end users, whether it's on the food grade side being milling for flour, or on the feedstocks for poultry and organic dairies. And that's where we kind of focus on, because they need consistency like farmers like consistent being able to sell. And we've developed those relationships over the last couple of decades, and we've added a few. But that's where I think it's beneficial for both the buyer and our producers, is to have that relationship. We don't do a whole lot in specialty grains. We've seen a higher demand for white milo on the food grade side, and we have some of our producers doing that. But like any specialty grain, if we tell all of them to grow it, the next thing you know, we have overproduction. So there's a fine line when you're moving into even milo, which is not as specific or specialty as some of the grains that you're talking about. You can't have overproduction, or you won't be able to get it sold. And as far as just like NFO, our membership fees $125. You're not required to sell any grain through us if you don't choose to. It's completely, if you want to try it, sell it. The only time you're committed is when you sign a contract like Mike was talking about to sell your production. I would emphasize on specialty grains to make sure you have a contract in place, and to make sure that contract is more in your favor. So if you have an act of God It's more of a production on acreage and not a bushel, because you don't know what the weather's going to do. And I've seen some producers getting into some trouble. And that's, again, why it's good to have a full-time marketer to be able to look over that paperwork for you so you don't get yourself in trouble.
So
We have
Steve,
a question
yeah, go
about
ahead,
the
Morgan.
contracts. Can I just pause and ask that?
Yes.
Okay, so question on marketing a whole field of any grain. Are you always able to sell all of the grain that you harvest to your source, or do you sell a specific bushel volume? What happens in the case of a hailstorm or a windstorm with respect to your contract through the marketer?
It sounds like maybe a farmer question. Yeah.
It just had to do with the contract, so I paused there, but
No, that's great. Yeah.
I can jump in on this quickly, and that was going to be a question that I was going to ask, and that is crop insurance for specialty crops. Sometimes it can be a challenge. I know when we were trying to grow field peas a few years back, my insurance agent had to work all summer, but finally got the crop insured. So that obviously can be a challenge. The other thing is, and Charlie and Will can jump in here. You know, Charlie isn't going to send all that oats down the road at one time, so it's going to be, you know, semi-load lots and maybe more than one buyer. Who knows? So that part of it, for sure. But I think the thing we have to look at, and Steve talked about that, act of God, and the insurance. Several years back, I had barley contracted to a seed house, and the weather just did not cooperate, and the barley crop was about a third of what it should have been. But the insurance company contracted or insured me on the contract price. And so what I was supposed to get out of that field based on the contract is what I got returned through insurance. So active God came in there as well, but also know that you can insure on existing contracts.
Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, the contracts nowadays are really kind of interesting from the end users, from the big buyers. I will not do a forward contract without an act of God, and I'll have that relationship, have those conversations with that end user, that buyer, before I go into it. And then, just recently in the last 3-4 months, some of these bigger buyers have been sending me contracts. We put the deals together. They don't even put their payment terms down. And I'll call them on it. And, you should be paid the farmer within 21 days, 14 days, 30 days, whatever it is. It should be in writing in the contract. And recently, there hasn't been any payment terms, so I've had to add them after a conversation with them. I add the 14 days, 21 days, 30 days, whatever it is, and then I send it back to them and sign an initial. And it didn't used to be that way. I mean, years ago, I've been in this business 17 years I worked with a cooperative here in Wisconsin before I joined NFO. And you got your payment within 10 to 14 days. And now it's stretching out into, 21 to 31 days is kind of the norm.
Okay.
We will run a full credit check on all of our buyers at least once a year, and new buyers for sure, companies, before we get into a contract with them. But it is absolutely an act of God on a forward contract, and you want to be able to sell everything that producer has, unless they have a crop failure. You want to have
Yeah,
that covered in the
Mike,
contract.
that was a great question, because I was actually, our next question was going into trends, like what trends that you all are seeing. I see Will unmuted. You may have something to add.
I'd just like to talk just a little bit on the crop insurance issue. so when you're looking at a specialty crop, you might say, well, there's no way that'll be insurable. And you might even go to your crop insurance agent and they'll say, oh, I've never heard of that, or I don't know anything about that, so it's probably not insurable. But there are provisions for a lot of these crops, and I'll just give the example of edible beans. Edible beans are not grown in my county, but I have a crop insurance agent that was willing to do the legwork to figure out how to get that crop insured. And like Carmen was saying, at the contract price. And so you have to have that, there's an order here that has to be, and you have to have your market discovered, and you have to have your contract so that you have this contract price. If you have that in place, you're going to get a much better situation on the crop insurance front than if you're going off of what they think the price is, because in my experience, it's usually significantly less than what the actual price is. While in my experience, a marketer is a key person to have, but so is a good crop insurance person. And a lot of crop insurance folks are working in the conventional world and are not accustomed to going the extra mile to get the it's called a special agreement, and they basically, there's basically a back and forth with the insurance company. But there are provisions to insure some of these crops. Not every one of them, but it is out there, and it's worth finding someone to help with that as well. Crop insurance is also not very straightforward thing to navigate. So I think sometimes farmers we don't like to ask for help sometimes, and it's important, especially if you're in especially area, to be willing to accept some help and advice.
Thank you, Will. All right, Steve, we've got a couple minutes. What are you seeing in trends for just long-term opportunities or trends in specialty grain markets?
Well, to be completely honest, I'm not a marketer, so I don't know.
Okay.
As a producer, I've tried, and it's going to have a lot of bearing on where you're at in the country. Because I can tell you here in Kansas, there's not a lot of specialty grains that I could produce consistently and be able to market. So I'm not sure on the trends on that. Mike may be a better person.
Mike, do you have anything else to add maybe to what you're seeing? You talked a little bit about what you're seeing. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, it seems the organic market is in a kind of a cloud of a funk right now, where the demand is there. We need more organic farmers, and the prices they need better. They need to improve. So it's putting that producer into a box to produce more for less money. And that's really not what organic was intended to be happen, 25, 30, 40 years ago. It was to getting the producers a fair buck and to be compensated for their efforts and their extra efforts. So it's really it's kind of a cloudy time right now, and but the demand's there.
It is.
That for this fall, I have never seen in my 17 years of buyers reaching out looking for corn, looking for beans. I mean, we're in the harvest, and typically it's the harvest is done right now, and typically it's, oh no, Mike, we're filled now till the first quarter, but they're not covered. So that's the whole key of cooperative marketing and sharing that information and knowing where that market is. And of course, yeah, logistics are a big role in it. I feel for the guys in South Dakota. I know there's been a big expansion in the dairy side, the big conventional dairies, and some of my growers have taken advantage of that in their hay rotation and their alfalfa rotation. You sell it to the conventional dairy, and it'll come in and harvest, and it'll be done. So yeah, it's needless to say, it's an interesting time.
So what do you think, Carmen? Just take us home. What do you think is like one reason why someone would want to transition to organic and incorporate specialty grains in this season of challenging times? 1 minute.
Yeah.
Take us
To
home.
me, what I liked about organics is you cannot read the label and follow directions. You have to be innovative. You have to be creative. The challenges are there every day, every week. And a quick one-liner, that was the only way that I was able to get Luke and Allie Peterson started on my farm, because over the years, I had built up a good financial climate so that I could actually finance Luke and Allie to start farming. It would not have happened without the organic. And I was just telling somebody the other day, if I averaged out all the corn that I sold over the last 40 years, it would average over $9 a bushel. So that's at least double what's conventional. So it does put you in that much better position. But the other thing is, you can be so much more creative on that land when you're doing organic. You are in charge. You make the decisions. And at the end of the day, that is the most rewarding thing that I ever got out of farming. End of story.
Thank you, Carmen. Any questions, Morgan, yet? Well,
Yeah, we have
okay.
one more. So from Callie, she wrote in saying that she's listening in from Kansas City, and they have an online food hub where the farmer or grower can market any of their leftovers online and with the type and amount, and then the buyers can offer to purchase without a contract. It was designed for urban growers, but it seems to be taking off for larger farmers as well. Is there any similar resources in South Dakota? She's curious to know what these different methods might look like outside of Kansas City. I know that there are a few websites through our Soil Health Coalition, as well as specialty producers, where both buyers and growers can list opportunities or things that they might have. But there's no way to purchase through those platforms right now. I don't know if anyone else has anything to share.
I don't know. I don't know of any in South Dakota you're right, the purchasing piece. Yeah, I don't know.
I
It's a
am
good
going
idea.
to allow the attendees, like if you'd like to unmute and ask. And Callie, if you're there and able to answer, I'm curious, is that platform something that people can complete the transaction through, or is it only to market and show that it's available?
Hi, welcome. My name is Kelly McLaughlin, and I'm actually an urban farmer here in KC, but I'm also in planning and zoning. And so I work with our conservation district and the NRCS over here and our other farm service agency type groups and extension offices to either work on my own projects or to help other farmers. And one thing that we developed is we try to make this an online marketable thing. So if you have a weird short run of something that you grew and it's not enough to really do a whole lot with, or and maybe your restaurant can use it in their dish one night, or a restaurant wants to use a special and they're looking for just one ingredient that, Cisco or whoever was short on, or they forgot to order, they can go online and say, hey, do you have any of this available? And I think they were making updates to their payment processing system. But yeah, you were able to just like literally pay online. But otherwise, sometimes people just say, hey, do you want to just meet up and you can send us a bill if they have, because sometimes people have their own individual billing systems as farmers that they want to utilize instead. But the option to pay online, I mean, people use Cash App, Venmo, PayPal even for some of this stuff. But for the larger quantities, or the more experienced farmers, they tend to have their own billing system offsite that they want to use. And so the hub just becomes kind of the marketing platform, which eliminates the need for someone to have that third party marketer for them to say, hey, we've got this amount, and kind of like eliminate that brokerage aspect of it, because the website acts as the brokerage. And I don't know if it's completely rolled out yet, but we were looking at a way of rolling that out to where the public would be able to do it. And it wasn't just exclusively for restaurants. That's not 100% fully out there yet, but let's say you have some kind of person who just likes to cook a lot and they want 25 pounds of strawberries, or because we have those trucks that come by, but they come by once a year, right? You have a truck that comes by and says, oh, buy a half a bushel of peaches for $50. And our canners and some of our people love that kind of stuff. But for a localized option, that doesn't really exist. So it's more aimed currently towards people who are marketing in an industry, but I think that there's going to be a public facing available option for these people if they want to, kind of like a last resort, or maybe they're the only person that has it, kind of thing. So yeah, the payment option is there, but sometimes people just try to use their own methods of payment otherwise.
Thanks for sharing. While you were talking, I put a few things in the chat. One is that are similar resources in South Dakota. SD Fresh Connect is one through our Soil Health Coalition, and then two through the South Dakota Specialty Producers. Those are the most similar things that are coming to my mind right now, but again, no payment through those. Any other questions? I know we're a little bit over time.
This is Ed Resnicek. I take it you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Recently retired general manager for Central Plains Organic Farmers. If I may, one last thing I'd like to add. The farmers on the program today are all connected to organic grain marketing cooperatives, Central Plains Organic Farmers, or NForganics. I don't know how many other specialty specialty grain organic farmers are on this webinar today. But if there are some not connected to one of the co-ops, reach out. And if there are, fair number of specialty crop producers, especially grain producers in South Dakota in the region, not connected to a cooperative, they should consider possibly organizing a specialty crop grain marketing committee that people could start sharing information, considering ways to organize, possibly work through one of the existing co-ops. And as a marketing committee, I think they could gain eligibility for OFARM membership and become part of the regular marketing Zoom meetings and other kinds of related organizational activities. Central Plains Organic Farmers began under the name of Kansas Organic Producers in the 1980s, and it began by forming an Kansas Organic Producers Grain Marketing Committee, and that developed into a cooperative.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That has been discussed and has been recommended, and to me several times, like, oh, we should start a committee or something to be able to do that in South Dakota, because there's not a lot right now to choose from. I used to market all my stuff through Schooler Grains. I don't anymore, but that was my kind of my go-to for many years. But any other questions, Morgan, that came in? I don't see any.
Well, just one thing I would like to add today, maybe it's a little off topic from what we discussed, but I find oats or any small grain to be a great soil building component of any rotation. And so I would strongly consider or encourage any producers, and, you know, being our audience here today may be more specialty growers, which may be more smaller or moderate size operations. And so small grains can fill that soil building role in those operations. What I really like about oats is if you get a fair amount of rain in August, you get a regrowth, you know, kind of what the combine spits out the back. And it's nice to see kind of a volunteer crop of oats coming a second time in the late summer, which builds the soil. Small grains are valuable for straw, for livestock operations, or for neighbors who want bedding for dogs, cats, chickens, that type of aspect. And so I would strongly encourage, you know, the members of the Specialty Growers Association to put small grains as part of their rotation. It could be a soil building part of your operation. It may be a little bit of side income versus maybe some of the specialties that you're mainly marketing.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing before we go, I'd like to mention too that we do have an organic operators group within South Dakota Specialty Producers Association that meets the second Wednesday of every month at 3 p.m. Right, Morgan, did I get the time right? Yeah, second Wednesday of every month at 3 p.m.
Central Time, yeah.
Central Time. So any of you it's open group. So you don't have to be a member of SPA to participate in that. We have awesome speakers. Kate Mendenhall is actually speaking at our next meeting. We're going to be talking about organic policy and the clawback letters. So anybody and everybody is invited to be part of that. You don't just have to be a farmer or a specialty producer to join that. We'd like to get more voices from all different aspects of the supply chain on those calls. Because we have a lot of interest in South Dakota in organic, but a lot of producers are just reluctant to, you know, transition. They're looking for a mentor. They're looking for technical assistance. That's why we're here. I get a lot of phone calls and people are like, I want to do this, but I don't know how to do this. I don't even know how to connect to the markets. I have no idea. It's a whole different way of, like Carmen was saying, it's a whole different lifestyle. You have to make those decisions for your farm. You can't hire somebody necessarily to do it for you. So that's another thing too. That information is available on the Specialty Producers website as well, on how to connect and be a part of those.
Angela, I would really invite you to connect with our office manager, Pauline Drake, and maybe we can have a joint OFARM meeting with the group that you just mentioned, just to start sharing ideas.
Absolutely. That sounds like a great idea.
Good.
All right. I think we're done, Morgan. If anybody has anything else, we are going to close this down. I really appreciate everyone's participation today. It was so good. I learned every time this is the rock star team. I think if I was going to have some folks together, this is the dream team right here. So thank you so much for being a part of this. I really appreciate it. And you can follow up and reach me at any time. I think all of you have my email address if you need to get a hold of me. We'll be posting this webinar up on YouTube, so you'll be able to share with your friends. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, the last link I dropped in the chat was to future events. So you can find those meetings on there as well as upcoming transition to organic events. And when I end the meeting, there's going to be, like Angela mentioned earlier, a quick survey that pops up in your browser. We would really appreciate if you don't skip over that, just so we can use those responses for our reporting and as we keep growing this program. So thank you all again for your time.